So welcome everybody, or welcome back to the channel for a video today about a very special late 17th century French piece here in walnut. Now, the 17th century begins in France in the wake of civil wars, which had kept most furniture prior to this very mobile, smaller than this piece. And even as peace returned, society kept their habit of moving from castle to castle, and furniture to furnish every habitation and every room was still rare. In fact, if we look at a four-doored, two-tiered armoire like this from the previous Renaissance period, 100 years earlier, we're going to see that the same type of piece is quite a bit smaller. And then we remember that the prime piece of the Gothic period, even 100 years earlier, was of course the portable chest. A piece like this shows us how, during the 17th century, furniture increases in size, as King Henry IV influenced the national lifestyle in 1604 with a law that prohibited the construction of fortified homes, moats, and which mandated that windows be less defensive and, more comfortable, larger. So, a return to luxury, comfort, and therefore furniture which is less portable and more huge occurred. And thanks to the etchings of Abraham BOSSE, we have wonderful and vivid depictions of these affluent 17th century interiors, the likes of which such a piece would have at one time called home. Now, this presentation cabinet from the second half of the 17th century was necessary to build in two tiers just to facilitate its initial installation. And we could loosely date this to about the 1690s for reasons that we will get into, but the overall style here and the elements of its decor are more to the tune of the mid-1600s. Now, in general, I'm just really glad to be able to preserve a trace of this one here today because it's one of the more singular regional masterpieces that I've encountered, and I do hope, as usual, that taking a closer look will interest you, if not perhaps inform your own collecting. So the term regional masterpiece just helps us differentiate these works of decorative art from normal utilitarian country furniture. As with regional masterpieces here, we're dealing with something that was made in a sought-after workshop and something which is going to be emblematic of the height of style and quality of the given region's art furniture production. Within the repertoire of regional masterpieces, this is a wonderful example of the Louis XIII style, with these turned columns here, as turned wood is really an essential characteristic of this original French style, and the diamond points as well that we see all over the sides and, of course, the facade of the piece. And here they form a radial star, which is really quite rare. But overall, there's just an uncanny complexity to the design and the decor here, especially with regard to the moldings, that really sets this piece apart from the already limited number of 17th century originals. But anyway, the Louis XIII style corresponds loosely to the reign of King Louis XIII, of all people, from 1610 to 1643. But the style really emerges a bit earlier, around the year 1600, and then it persists up to the beginning of the reign of King Louis XIV in 1661. Now, for regional masterpieces like this, which were made outside of that trend-setting capital, Paris, we actually see the Louis XIII style and different phases of its development occurring all throughout the 17th century, even well up into the 1700s. So for dating this piece, it's the imposing size of this Louis XIII armoire that would lead us to situate it more at the end of the 17th century, because furniture near the beginning of the 17th century tended to be smaller than this. So even if the turned columns and the diamond points here are really to the tune of that mid-17th century Louis XIII style, it's the stature of the piece which really is to the tune of the later Louis XIV style at the end of the century, with this absolute imposing majesty to its architecture, to this complete richness of decor. And so that's how we might land on the aforementioned circa 1690 dating. So on that subject of the richness of decor, I went ahead and got a T. Let's just go ahead and glance at the sides of the piece, and that's really one of the extraordinary aspects of it that you may have already noticed, in that the sides are just as decorated, just as complete as the front. Now, often on even very fine pieces, of course, we're going to see that some care is taken to decorate the sides, but very rarely do we see a perfect repetition of the already very complex decor of the facade, so exactly on the sides of the piece. And that's what makes this piece very hard to compete with, in terms of all the other pieces of this variety that I've seen published in books. There really are very few that can compete with this one in terms of the thoroughness of the work. So there's even a lively optical illusion here that jumps out at us, such that we don't really see a rectangular panel here, but rather a jagged circular shape that jumps out at us due to how these diamond points were sculpted. We're going to notice that each of them was sculpted in a particular way with 3 different levels and different angles that catch the light and make this jagged circular star shape pop out at us when we approach this piece head on. And so again, there are 3 levels to the way that these diamond points were sculpted, 3 different angles. And they are all surrounded by shallower moldings, which themselves are surrounded by more tubular ones. And there's just a beautiful complexity to this that we can even see inside of the door, interestingly. We want to take a look at the joinery here that's behind the very artistic exterior of the piece. And now when we close the door, we can take a look at these kioscushions in the shape of a rooster's neck, which are probably original to the piece, and which are a design that's associated with late 17th century furniture. Now next, the finesse of the hinges here, as that just opens like a phantom in the night, just this possessed piece of furniture just opening on its own. But anyway, the finesse of the hinges here is congruent with metalwork of the period. And we're going to see that these are even decorated, the little baubles at the bottom, the series of baubles, they're decorated with an engraved little squiggle, I suppose. That's probably not the correct art history term here. But we see that extra care was even taken to decorate the hinges exceptionally on this very exceptional piece. In line with this notion of very subtle decor here, we're even going to see that the functional joinery here was designed to participate in the bewildering decor of this item, such that, the dowels are actually a repetition of very pleasant dots all across the facade of the piece. Now, something else that caught my eye with regard to these moldings, especially this band, these middle moldings here that separate the top and the bottom tiers, is just the number of imbrications here, the number of lines, 16 of them to be precise, which is really just a way for us to quantify the complexity here, as many pieces might just have 2 or 3, but we see on a piece here that's really been taken to a sort of different level, a real emblematic piece here of this type of furniture. We don't just see 2 or 3 lines, but we literally see 16 and then yet another 8. And there's 4 or 5 lines sculpted here around the drawer. And so it's the number of lines, it's these subtle details of quality that, we might not think about, but this is really distinguishing this piece from the vast majority of comparable ones. Now we might also take a look at these angled shapes here at the corners and even these protrusions, these semicircular ones here in the center of the piece, which are so harmoniously responding to sort of the identical shapes that we see at the top and at the bottom as well. Now, to just continue into the layers of unexpected detail and quality here, we need to take a look at this side molding here, where we actually see an inlaid point, which is part of the joinery of this molding, but it's just so beautifully integrated with the decor here as it continues the point of this molding here, and it aims away from the piece. That's just an artful addition, something I've never seen before, and it's really a testament to just the layers of unexpected quality that we continue to encounter the more we examine this item. Now, anyway, for the region of origin on a piece like this, the size of such an item, as well as this prominent architectural cornice, makes us think of the east of France, of Alsace, of Lorraine, of Franche-Comté, and we even see these faceted feet like this on pieces which come from the German Rhineland. And so we're going to move along to the east here, based on what we can see, even though we do see pieces of this nature coming out of the southwestern regions in France, even though they tend not to be quite as colossal. Anyway, what I'm getting at here too is that the most exceptional pieces are often enigmatic because they defy our usual elements of comparison. They are outstanding, and therefore they're hard to categorize. In terms of this East of France hypothesis, though, we should revisit this architectural cornice because the cornice is often featured in the East of France platforms which would have accommodated Delft stoneware, faience, in regions where this ceramic industry was developed, like Flanders, the East of France. And we see atop the cornice here that there seems to be a platform in the middle, although it is slanted, and perhaps there were blocks here at the corners which facilitated presenting faience. It's kind of unsure, but not impossible. Okay, so now while we're up there, we're going to notice the width of the structural boards, which are congruent with 17th century manufacture. Skinnier ones are associated with pieces of a later manufacture. And while we're panning over this hidden upper part of the cornice here, we see the rough saw marks true to pieces of the pre-industrial age, especially 17th century ones of this variety. You know, where the hidden backs, the undersides, and the tops would be left rough, as these parts were so rarely seen. Now we also see various hand-forged nails up here, some of which are at the end of their reigns, disintegrating into the wood. And now as we return back down to earth here and we look at the exterior of the cornice here at the right angle under the right light, we're going to see that it is slightly undulated, as it was all sculpted out by hand, of course, even though there's really a precision to the way that this was finished. We see that this really was a regional masterpiece, as there's really no clumsiness to the way all of these pieces were planed and sculpted. Now these drawers here, which are typical of such armoires, again we have the phantom opening the door on its own. The drawers are joined by a single rudimentary dovetail, which appears to have been reinforced at a later date with some more modern nails, as it is common for a piece like this to have undergone a few restorations. On the sides here near the back, we see that these turned columns have had little bits of them replaced, which is truly a sign of the care that this piece has had, you know, congruent with its quality over the decades, over the centuries. And anyway, in French law, we consider that a piece like this is still from the period if 10% of it, if less than 10% of it has been replaced, because, you know, naturally, a cabinet from the 17th century is very unlikely, after having lived in so many damp manners, it's unlikely that there's going to be 100% of this piece exactly as it was when it was made. It's just not the nature of how wood traverses time. So I really must thank the administrator of the fascinating French furniture reference site meublits.com for his commentary on this outstanding piece. And if you'd like to know, the last provenance here was the estate of a late doctor in Burgundy who sold his art collection in preparation for his foreseen passing, so that there would be enough funds left for his wife's Alzheimer's care. You know, every story has a beginning and an end. But it is to his discerning eye and to his care that we really owe the conservation of this wonderful Louis XIII style cabinet from the Louis XIV period, circa 1690. And as usual, I do hope that taking a closer look here has interested you. I hope that this will inform your own collecting, if not at least enhance your appreciation for furniture from the past. Now, if you like this video, please like it and please subscribe to the channel, as it would greatly help in the endeavor of creating an online period furniture library of the most compelling pieces that I encounter. Thank you.